So hello, we're live. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, welcome wherever you are. You're joining me here today in Haworth, which is a beautiful West Yorkshire village. Of course, known the world over for its association with the Brontes. And we're going to be walking up towards and going to have a look round the Bronte Parsonage. We're not going to be able to go in today, but we'll have a good look round the kind of village, the inside. We'll talk about kind of the Brontes and kind of life. But I thought it was nice, hiya Grace, for us to start here at the bottom by the railway. So I'm going to show you the very, very charming railway station in just a moment. But we're here in what I call the sidings, isn't it? And for over 100 years, the railway ran from Keighley to Oxenhope nearby here, and basically it served the mills. If I just kind of sort of pan up and give you a kind of sense of it, this one's a little bit grotty, this end of it, but as you can see, what we have is tall tenement buildings, mill buildings. This is a former industrial centre. Obviously now it's a very desirable village to live in. But in years gone by, the people that were accessed this railway would have been travelling from their villages to the nearby mills. And I can tell you that in this location here, a mill building was demolished, now obviously making way for the spar shop. So the line was first built here between 1864 and 1866. And it opened in 1867. But of course, the trains were kind of franchised. It was a kind of a little mini kind of local sort of setup to the Midland Railway. And so it joined on to the Bradford and Leeds Skipton line. So it was always a bit of an afterthought. And so I suppose it's not hugely surprising that this was one of the stations that fell under the famous Dr. Beeching's axe. For those outside this country who might not be aware of Dr. Beeching, he was instructed by the government, I guess the then Conservative government, to look at railways and the use. And it was essentially with the growth and affordability of the motor cars, they decided that the old model of having a railroad that ran to every town, every hamlet, every village, simply had kind of run its course. And so I don't know what proportion of England's railways were closed down, but it was an enormous proportion. Shut on 60%. Thank you, Jackie, for clarifying that. So 60%. So you can imagine the kind of impact for people. Basically, it was like, you've got from now on, you get buses, you get cars. What, of course, Dr. Beeching didn't even think about was the sheer aesthetic beauty of this station, this railway, this area. It is quite stunning. So as I say, this was a railway that had started to be transporting mill workers to and from work up and down the valley side. It's only a 5-mile stretch, but the train has to go up a very significant gradient. So obviously once that kind of closed down, that was sort of problematic. But I think because of the area, because of the kind of beauty, because of the kind of locations, then it's not hugely surprising. This was the first bit of the British Rail network to be privatised because it was bought out to be operated as a charity, to be operated as a pleasure line. There was always the intention that this was going to be part of the kind of passenger transport system once again. So the closures that happened, I believe, is 1962. That's when it closed to passengers. Sorry, December 61 it closed to passengers and to goods in June of 1962. Obviously, a lot of people kind of fought against this and they tried to kind of save it. So the Preservation Society, which was formed, which kind of created the company to buy the line outright and to lease the station. The intention originally, I'm just going to, I hope they won't tell me off, but I'll just give you a little sight inside because it's absolutely beautiful. It's all done by heritage volunteers. It is such a, if you come, you must come and visit the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway. It is an absolute credit. It is stunning, it's beautiful, and the motivation of the individuals, to come and give up their time to keep this going, I think, is an enormous credit. They're shutting up, so I'm not going to sort of come inside. We're going to walk up towards the town. We'll have a look over the bridge. So the volunteers basically made this happen. They kind of brought it back. Absolutely, Mark, it's fantastic. It's still here. And it reopened in June 1968. So I'd say the intention was to keep this going as a passenger transport facility, but it never kind of quite panned out that way. But such is obviously the love and the regard for this area and its links with the Brontes, it became a fantastic gateway. It became a way of people having an adventure. Rather than arriving here by car, you could arrive here by train. And so it's not a terribly long train journey. The journey itself, I think if you do end to end, it's about 40 minutes or so. But you're encouraged to get off at each of the stops and to basically just enjoy these villages. And of course, famously, there's Oakworth Station, which is, I think, the next, hi, Linda, I think the next station down, which was the scene for the very, very famous Railway Children film. It's filmed obviously in the 1960s. Jenny Agutter, Bernard Cribbins and so forth. So, you know, if you've seen that film, basically you'll know precisely what it looks like. That's Oakworth. And that's the next station down from here. But everything is just cute as a button. It is absolutely delightful. That's right, Kathy. The Railway Children film, not at this station, but the next one down, at Oakworth. But again, it makes it a bit like we're in Stamford, but we're in Lincolnshire just the other day, of how easy it is to film when you come in as a sort of film production crew when you've already got facilities that look like this. Now, it's a shame there's no steam train arrived. That would have been perfect timing, but at this time of year, the trains finish a little bit earlier. But you can just see how wonderful it is. You get that kind of sense of arrival. So, of course, you can also, you know, use this for kind of dinners, you know, kind of, go for an evening meal on the train. It's so romantic and it is such fun that I really can't recommend it highly enough to you. If you're in this part of the world, come to Haworth, but come to Keighley, get on the train and come this way. It is the way to arrive. So, with that in mind, I'll just give you another shot of the kind of sidings on this side. Yeah, I'm good, Joanne. Don't worry about me. I'm in Haworth. I'm in a good place. So just let this folk go past. The only thing with this tour is, as with so many others, so Pam did that. So Pamela from Banff, hi Pam. She's been on it. She knows what a fantastic experience it is going by train. But you mustn't put your head out the window. When you come back in, your face is all mucky because obviously the steam and the coal and the muck from the trains. So uphill, absolutely. I was just about to say that when I've heard about that get mucky face from the trains. This is one of those tours where I earn my keep. Whatever I earn today, believe me, I've earned it because it's an uphill. It's a Durham, it's a Lincoln, it's a Whitby. To that we had Haworth as one of the tours where I always need to keep your end and smile. I always earn my keep. So as you can see, you know, beautiful kind of stone cobbles. And when we get sort of a little bit higher up, I'll just kind of turn us around. It's not raining though, absolutely. Marlene, it's an idea, isn't it? Start at the top, but I think that to start at the top and kind of do the Brontes and the Moors and then kind of walk down would seem like maybe for a lot of people that they kind of seen what they wanted to see. So more of a tease you. Give you a flash ankle, as you might say, with the railway, and then gradually seduce you to stay on the tour. But I'll just kind of turn around at this point, A, to get a slight breather, but B, to start to give you a sense exactly. Stop and take in the view. Isn't that good advice for life? Stop and take in the view. So you can see how these houses, if you like, are just clinging to the hillside. And, you know, this is, if you like, the topography of this landscape is that you've basically got two roads. You've got one at the top and one at the bottom. And that's pretty much it. So the development of communities is linear. You'll get village after village after village, if you like, at the valley bottoms. And then, you know, obviously buildings developed up the sides. But it's the only way really it can work is on a linear basis. Because obviously it's the valley bottoms where the roads and the infrastructure are able to move. Pub, are you thirsty already, Mark? Well, I've hardly got going. But we'll point one out for you a long way. Perhaps we'll point out more than one. Because, of course, there is the famous one where Branwell was known to indulge more than a trifle. You have to learn to hill starts in Yorkshire and Lancashire. Absolutely, David. Well, this is definitely a hill start kind of tour. We get that out of the way, the first one. But thereafter, that's a kind of warm-up for the rest of the tour. Some of them, you just have to grit your teeth, dig deep, and just accept. We'll pick up on those questions outside here, I think, Marlene. Let's just enjoy our tour of Bronte country. But definitely, we'll be chatting about that. So Central Park. So this is quite modern. 1927, the park was laid out. So Bowls Green. Oh, I see. Well, if you want to, you mean rather than tip on here, I suppose you could do if you want to. It's John Wright, JOHNWRIGHT 0612 at iCloud.com. But I'm not too worried about that. So the bowling green, obviously, a little bit of bunting over there. Bunting cheers you up, right? And so this dates from 1927. So it's in between the First War and the Second War. And very kind of typical for that period. You know, kind of lots of kind of sort of formal laid out gardens, some lovely blossom we'll come and have a look at over here. But just before we sort of walk our way up into the sort of village proper, and these parks were very important in the kind of post-war period. Obviously, for a lot of people in the First World War was obviously incredibly traumatic, whether it was because of the experience of being on the Western Front, in the trenches, elsewhere, in the fields of engagement, or whether it was the minor okay, Shirley, my allergies are okay right now, or whether it was having lost other people. Places of peace and serenity start to have a much more important kind of component, if you like, particularly for those that lived in industrial areas where there wasn't a lot of green space. So, you know, moving on from, if you like, the promenading idea of kind of public parks and formality in the earlier period, it became very much a focus of places of peace, of remembrance. Laura's right on it there, a place of peace and quiet, you know. And don't forget, a lot of people working in noisy machinery with factories, you know, that just were hammering and making noises, you know, in industrial kind of settings. So I think, you know, the thought of having places of peace is very important. Can you personally recommend it? You're not listening to us, Laura. Sorry, I was just looking out across at a group of lads that I hope will be okay, but sometimes you just have to. So there's a park of peace over there that I'm not going to wander over because it looks like I might just get not accosted, but a bit of hassle, which I don't really want. So post-war need for peace, absolutely. So a lovely old bandstand, traditional entertainment. There's a Sunday afternoon, the brass band, and in so many of these industrial areas, whether we were in kind of manufacturing or, you know, coal extraction or whatever, brass bands were kind of really, really important sort of part of community and civic pride. If any of you have seen the movie Brassed Off, you'll see how they do 12 brass band competitions in one day in this area, basically go from village to village, and all the villages have got brass bands. And they belong to the pits, to the steelworks, to industrial places, and it was kind of recreation. A lot of them kind of started with Quakers. So Quakers were people, you know, kind of non-conformist Christians that very much believed in the power of, if you give people decent places to live, better work conditions, and things to do outside work, then you can conquer the demon drink, which they believe was the root of all evils. I seem to remember a sculpture made of 2p pieces. Yeah, it was, Mark. It was just over a little bit of Peace Park, but there was just seemed to be a bunch of drunken teens that I just didn't want to kind of get enmeshed with that. It's easier to get enmeshed than it is to get outmeshed, if one knows what I mean. Shakers and Quakers, yeah. So Quakers very much kind of believed that give people positive things to do, they will make the right kind of choices. So it is a great movie, isn't it? So look at these cordyline. I've got one of those in my house. I've got a lot of these in Yorkshire. Or cabbage palms, sometimes known as. So consequently, things like choral societies, a lot of those around here, brass bands, amateur dramatics, bowls, cricket clubs, football clubs. You know, these are the sort of things that were put on for men to basically distract them from drinking and gambling the money away. So, you know, that's kind of if you like, the root of why I suppose there are kind of so many of these kind of, hangovers, if you like, from the Victorian era, because it was about temperance. It was about encouraging people to make better choices by singing in choirs, playing in brass bands, etc., etc. But Mark, he's ready for a jar. He said so. Yes, they do. Did it really work? Interesting. Do you mean, did the distraction theory work? I mean, they certainly all had brass bands. Whether they were sober when they played, I don't know. That's a great question. But they certainly all have brass bands. So, getting a little bit out of breath. So, I'm just about to come up, Alison, onto the bottom of the road. So, with a splendid lane, Butt Lane. So another sip of water. They have a competition on Trinity Friday. Thank you, Kathy. Create the basis of hooliganism. Butt Lane. Take a big deep breath. Absolutely. So onwards. What can I know? I was raising a titter, a little bit of mirth there. So I'm going to come over to the crossing. Breathing out, absolutely. It's a water butt. I would hope so. I would think so. But lovely kind of stone. So we're going to cross over, and then we will have a look at the famous road. So the site of the park, as we were saying, was it's on the kind of western slope of this kind of narrow valley of the River Worth. So you've got natural ground that kind of levels, with sort of way off to the east, very, very kind of just runs quite gently, but it doesn't feel like it when you're kind of walking up. But in other words, it's a kind of rather smooth kind of gradient rather than kind of like escarpments. So it's not a stiff drop like we've got at Sutton Bank. It is all very gradual, but of course what it does mean is everywhere you're walking uphill. So Haworth that we're coming into now, the Haworth that most will recognise, obviously is a village in the city of Bradford in West Yorkshire. We're in the area that call the Pennines. So we're 3 miles southwest of Keighley, which is where you would get the train if you're coming over this way. You park your car there, get the train. And about 10 miles west of Bradford. And we're about 10 miles to the east of Colne in Lancashire. So we're not far from the Yorkshire-Lancashire border. Okay, so right in the Pennines. And Haworth is first mentioned in historic records in 1209. And we think the name refers to a hedged enclosure or a hawthorn enclosure. Biddle Street. I know, well, there's a Penis Town or Penis Town, which is, you do have to wonder, don't you, how these things got past the committee, but there you go. It's near Barnsley. Between Penistone is between Home Firth, where we lost some wine, and Barnsley. It's a nice place, actually, but, yeah, unfortunate. I think you'd have to say so. But the four pubs historically lined this hillside. There is lots of piddles in Devon. There's a piddle Trentide, I remember staying very nearby there. So we're just a penny. Oh, there you go, Claire. So Claire's not from Barnsley, and so she'll know all about that. Oh my God, there's not. Really, Fran, there's a place called that in Newfoundland. Wow. Okay, so, the name is first recorded as Haworth on a map of 1771. That's not to say it didn't exist before that, but that's the earliest record. And so much of history, of course, is about saying, this is what we know. The oldest reference we can find at this moment in time is from a map in 1771. Now, of course, this is famous as the home of the Bronte sisters. It's an undisputed kind of literary mecca, and it attracts visitors from all over the world. Oh my God, no, Joey, this is getting silly. So with its kind of historic cobbled main street, the parsonage, the moors, and just the picturesque proportion of this Airedale village, it kind of exudes a vintage charm that makes you feel like you've stepped into another era, really. Let me just kind of spin around so you can just get, again, a sense of this setting behind us. And I think you can see why, even if it wasn't for the Brontes, which of course is just an enormous dragon pull, it's got a beauty all of its own. So, the fact that it's got the Brontes as well, just gives it, if you like, it just gives... Robert, stop. You have to stop now, you're making me laugh. which is great. I did say let's have a laugh today, but I didn't mean that you were going to make me laugh by silly names. But fantastic. Go on, any silly names, do feel free to put on my Facebook group, All Points North with John. I shall enjoy those heartily. But isn't it just lovely? Debbie. It's a yellow card offence, that one. So this has been a hugely popular visitor destination since the publication of the Life of Charlotte Bronte by Elizabeth Gaskell in the year of 1857. It's very near me, is Wet Wang, Christina, but that's not really the point, is it? You're having me digress more than a trifle already, and we're scarcely 3 cobbles up the hillside. So, oh, stop it. Tish, that's it. Right. So, this was inspired, right? So, Mrs. Gaskell wrote her book based on letters between Charlotte Bronte and Ellen Nussey, who was her very, very close sort of friend. And so, the account, the famous Life of Charlotte Bronte, it's rather partial, and it actually led to a number of libel claims. It was quite sort of contentious at the time. But what it did do is it kind of cemented a fascination with the sisters that has never sort of gone away. So, however long ago that is, sort of 160, 170 years ago, that's how long it is people have been fascinated by the story of the 3 sisters and, of course, the tragic brother Bramwell, and have been coming here wanting to get a feel for the place, wanting to get a sense of what it is about this place that can produce. Can you hear the train behind me? I'm quiet. You might be able to hear the steam train. There you go. Sadly, we can't see it from here, but undoubtedly from the train tracks. So as I say, Mrs. Gaskell had sort of set out to answer the question, really, of how was it these 3 Yorkshire sisters could have written such kind of outrageous novels. And she sort of had her own answer. She answered her own question, Mrs. Gaskell, because she firmly believed it was a direct result of growing up in this isolated village on top of the moors. Oh, there is a sweet shop right at the top, actually, opposite the church. So we'll have a look in the window. If that's something that interests you, we can definitely do that. And I think it should continue, Sharon, to be an intercourse discussion. Absolutely. Let's keep that. So Patrick Bronte, who of course is the father of the Bronte children, the sisters Bramwell and so forth, was appointed the role of perpetual curacy of Haworth in 1820, which on paper was a promotion from where he'd come from his previous role, but in reality, a dispute between local residents and the vicar of Bradford. There was a bit of if you like, a dispute over who was responsible for paying the salaries, meant that he only ever actually got, we're going to be outside, Catherine, not inside, but yes, he never actually got the full salary of what he was kind of due. So consequently, they lived in what you might call genteel poverty. Yeah, so Mark's made a good point there. We've got stone that is, because obviously it's a former industrial area, that is covered in soot, in carbon from the mills, because it looks black, but also where you can see some that have been sandblasted, that have been cleaned, whatever has been used on them. Obviously you get very different. So this is actually the native colour of the stone, but generations, decades and decades. Now if I just go in on Zoom, give you as much zoom as possible, you might just be able to see a puff of steam. Can you see the puff of steam? Just in the middle there of the train that's just disappeared. Probably gone now, but... So he came, and so as a result of this, kind of lived in genteel poverty. And you can see the house, it looks like it's kind of really nice, sort of high quality of life, but actually they never really had very much money at all, the Bronte family. But for many people around here, their poverty was grinding. It wasn't even genteel poverty. Because in the 19th century, the village and the kind of surrounding settlements here were largely industrial, which kind of puts it at odds with the portrayal. If we imagine kind of Wuthering Heights as the portrayal of this area, we imagine, wild kind of landscapes and moorlands, which is true, not far away from here. But, this was absolutely an industrial town. And in 1850, so we're jumping ahead a little bit here, Patrick Bronte, so concerned about the death toll, finally managed to get an investigation he'd been asking for years to find out what it was about this village, why it had this terrible early mortality rate, which had led to all but one of his 6 children, including the writers Emily and Anne, dying by the age of 31. And Babbage's inspection uncovered deeply unsanitary conditions. Unfortunately, there was no sewers, so excrement was flowing down the hillside here. Waste from slaughterhouses and pigsties were being held for months in fenced areas, and kind of overcrowded and poorly ventilated housing and poorly oxygenated and overcrowded graveyard filtered into the water system. So quite literally, because of very bad planning with the water, actually it was running through the decomposing corpses before it was going into people's houses. So if you wonder what the impact of that was, at this time the average life expectancy in this village was 25.8 years, and 42% of the residents died before the age of 6. So again, thinking about our Mary Ann Cotton stories the other day, I know not everyone was on there, we're talking about the high levels of infant mortality. 42% of children died here before the age of 6. So that is what clean water does. I know we've got Marlene, I'm sure some others are involved in kind of public health or nursing. It's so easy for us to focus on drugs, antibiotics, steroids, all these things, but actually clean water, sanitation, is the number one cause of death. Same today, isn't it, in sub-Saharan Africa, the places that haven't got clean water. So we forget quite how recent, we're talking about 1850, not 1350, 1850. People were dying here, mostly in the early 20s, because they were drinking tainted water that was killing them. So Lorna, some of the indigenous people still don't have them, so I know we've always got lovers of bookshops, so we'll just stop for a minute and let you admire. Clean water's vital. There is no life without clean water. It is the number one thing that sustains us or kills us. And it's not difficult for us to get it right. But it took an awful lot of pushing to make that happen. So the General Board of Health then kind of prompted improvements in the conditions of the village. So consequently, from the 1850s onwards, things begin to improve somewhat because they get clean water. Now, fortunately, the Brontes actually had their own pump. It was one of the only houses in the village that had a clean water source. But it said that the general air and the stink around here, if you like, did for them. They sort of gentle constitutions, and they simply weren't sort of robust enough because they all died so young. But of course, they built a reservoir up at the top, so that eventually sort of brought sort of fresh water. So obviously, tourism now counts so much in the local economy. And you've got the major attractions, obviously the Bronte Parsonage, the railway we saw at the bottom. And all the way up here, we've now got obviously galleries, we've got tea rooms, we've got kind of shops that want us to come in. And very tempting it is too. Everything is done very nicely. It's very slow. And because obviously it's uphill, it makes you kind of gently sort of take your time. Thank you, Vicky and Gail. You know, it's the sort of place where you don't want to be in a hurry. You know, it's a place to savour, it's to enjoy, and then look at, of course, the pressure on this. Look at the stone mullions, around the windows and the doors. It's all just sort of charming. Yeah, climbing up for a long time now. So here it says, Bayek, coffee and ice cream parlour in here. Now, David's grandfather was born in Haworth in 1865. So, he wouldn't have been so very different, David, in terms of the sanitation conditions. And as I said so often on these tours, what we now look at as houses that are charming, beautiful, aesthetically really going to tick our boxes, would have been cramped, overcrowded, lacking in sanitation, no running water, no toilets, simply textile workers' accommodation. But as I say, sorry, I'm just getting out of this car. It's a shame that cars sort of constantly run up, but of course you've got to have vehicles coming up. But isn't it, just for those who haven't seen it, isn't it kind of quite something? So we're going to pass the Black Bull pub in a minute, which is allegedly where Bramwell started his exploration with alcohol, with opium, we believe. So of course this is also the base for exploring what they call Bronte country. We're fairly close to both Bradford and Leeds. So the Brontes weren't born here. They are they're born in a place called Thornton, near Bradford. But they wrote most of their novels whilst living here at the parsonage with the father, who was the parson of the church that we're going to see in a minute, of St Michael and all the angels. Now, St Michael and all the angels actually has been substantially rebuilt since this time. I'll show you the original bit. And the reason for this is that the water that was running down the walls, which was causing it to fall down, it was found was water that was running directly through the burial pits. The graveyard was so full and the bodies were buried with so little, if you like, coverage, that it was creating a bog of decomposing bodies, and that water was running through and destroying the church. So the church that Patrick Bronte worked at, served at, has been largely replaced, but is in precisely the same kind of location, and of course the parsonage behind it. I know it's horrible, isn't it? I'm not sort of saying this to put you off the place, but simply this is the story, this is the place. If we wonder how it was that, that these three young women wrote these novels that still can astound us with their kind of strangeness and otherworldly quality, is an awful lot of it is where they lived and what they were exposed to and how isolated this would have been. So I'm just going to get a drink. There's a big car park left down the hill. Maybe they park there. Maybe they do. But so these are Black Bull, which is much favoured by Branwell. So Branwell, something of a kind of tragic figure. He was the only boy, sort of one of 6 children, the only boy, and tried his hand at a variety of things, so poetry, novel writing, art, but couldn't get the recognition that he felt he was due. Some people believe he is, if you like, the missing genius, the unacknowledged genius of the family. Others believe that his talent is somewhat exaggerated and that it's no wonder perhaps that he didn't get the recognition because his work wasn't worthwhile. I'm not going to have a view on that one, but isn't this pretty? Look at this here. Isn't this lovely? Loving that one. And of course, what makes these places super cute is not only have you got the stone building blocks, can you see the limestone slates as well? So what's going on there? Absolutely beautiful. So it just creates an absolute kind of harmony, I think, with in between kind of landscape. When Philip Larkin talks about linkage of landscape and sky, I kind of really sort of get what he's talking about. Is how at times the built environment and nature just work so beautifully together. You can't imagine it not being there. So Patrick Bronte, as he comes here for the first time, so how will that building? Well, this bit's an extension on the side of it, but most of these buildings are built in the latter part of the 18th century and the early part of the 19th century. So this is very much the village as it would have been during the period of when Patrick Bronte was settling here from 1820 onwards. I'll just show you this because I know we've always got another bookshop, but it's got a rather nice window display there. I'll just hold it there so you can take your postcards. I'll bring it up closer. Celebrating Vote for Women 100 years. So that was obviously in 2018, but it's still there. So we've got the rather nice Edwardian ladies, the suffragettes, maybe suffragists, that were campaigning to get women the vote. But it's all rather nice, isn't it? So rather colourful. So we'll show you her. And do we have somebody from New Zealand on the tour? I believe we do. Because New Zealand was the first country in the world to give women the vote. We talk about it in this country, but actually New Zealand was actually the first to do that. So thank you, Alison. I'm sure you knew that already. It's something to be very proud of in your progressive nation. But are they answering back? So again, lovely sort of bookshops. And of course, something else we're going to be talking about fairly soon, or hope to be talking about, which of course is Anne Lister. So we've got, I'll show you these, horses coming down the hillside now. How lovely is that? Absolutely, those brave women that led the line.
I'm going to come and photo bomb.
Hiya, how's it going?
Very good, and you?
You speaking to the world, yeah? You've got a whole bunch of people on, so give us a wave.
Wow, hello.
Now, what are the name of these horses?
Murphy.
Murphy, hi Murphy.
He says, hi, world.
And?
Tinkerbell.
Tinkerbell. So I'm guessing boy and girl, right?
Well, go.
Fantastic. How did I get it? There's something in the air, isn't there? Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Have a lovely ride. Isn't that wonderful? There we go. The things we see on these tours. So I'm not going to slip in poo, am I? I hope you've left it clean up here. So, well, it is. Bramwell certainly thought so. So Bramwell spent a lot of time here. So we're going to see the church next. So the church, as I say, was rebuilt as a result of the fact it was falling down because of this sort of water running through, this fetid, horrible water, and partly public subscription, partly money from the diocese enabled the rebuilding of this church. So consequently, the only bits of this church that remains still, wasn't able to meet them, if you like, authentic to the period of the time when the Brontes were here, is the church tower. So I'll show you that in just a moment. So this is St Michael and the angels. So hang on a sec. Women on the Isle of Man got the votes before women in ... Not quite sure when that's going to be. Look at that phone box. I don't know, is it still in use? So as I say, here is the famous Black Bull, the haunted denizen of Bramwell Bronte. I don't know if there's a phone box in here, but let's have a look. We'll do that. No, there's no phone box, it's an information site. So this, as I say, is like a movie. So we'll just have a look at this bit first, and then we will go and have a look at the church. So, because it's nice and quiet here at the moment. Isn't it just divine? Isn't it absolutely divine? And of course, if you look down the middle there, you can see right back out onto sort of moorland. So it gives you a sense and appreciation of how close you are here to the wild. Now, I'm sure I said there was a sweetie shop round here, and I think I'm being proved wrong, aren't I? Oh, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. So who wanted the sweetie shop? There we go. How does the screen at the phone booth not get started? Oh, I don't know. So there we go. So let's pick yourself some sweeties that you can have a bag of for the rest of the tour, and decide what you'd like. Some aniseed balls, some pear drops there, some invalid. It's not a very flattering name, is it? Rhubarb and custards, some pomfret cakes. I was planning to take you to Pontefract Castle in the near future. Sweet peanuts. So very old-fashioned sets of aniseed humbugs. That's what we used to like aniseed balls when I was a kid, because you could suck them for hours. Little ball at the end, wasn't a tiny one. You remember those? Like a little bit of a sort of gritty ball. There we are, aniseed balls. These would get a quarter of those, and they would last all day. Aniseed balls. They were fantastic value for kiddie sweets. So, Dumbledore of sherbet lemons. Of course you did. And there's lovely old tins down here as well. It's a gobstoppers are great, but not so great talking for your mates. Because obviously you couldn't sort of chat away. But here we go. So, let's go and have a look, see what we can see of the church. As I say, obviously it's closed now. They close at 4:30. So the earliest parts of this church actually date back to 1481, which is the tower section. So there is a medieval section to it. So this is quite clearly the church, parts of this church the Brontes would recognise. But isn't it just glorious here, this top cabinet of curiosities being mentioned there a moment ago? Isn't it just, makes you melt, don't you think? It's in its own way, it's different, but it's every bit as nice as Stamford Bow were the other day, isn't it? It's just got that feel to it that it makes you want to run. And what's lovely, of course, is we've timed it just right. So, the light is still here, but it is like being transported in time. It's shooting straight back because there's no modern reference point, really, is there, for us to see? What's the blue round marked on the church? Well, that is, I'll show you what that is now. So that is telling us that this was the location of the Haworth stocks. So the earliest record of punishment stocks here is 1853, but it's believed there was a much older set outside the Black Bull, and they used to punish people for wrongdoings. In 1909 they were moved here. So stocks were really about public humiliation and justice being seen to be done. Often it was really about people being seen, they've transgressed, they've been in trouble, so consequently, people see that they are being punished, and they'll get a hard time. So this idea of kind of shaming, these days we do it, don't we, via kind of social media and some horrible all-pile-ons. There's nothing new in that. There's always been this element of, public, there's a core of disapproval as you might say, that when people break the societal norms and the rules, public punishment and shaming is very much kind of part of that. So I say we're looking at the church that is rebuilt from Patrick's time, built in the 1870s, and largely it was rebuilt by the Merrill family, a local mill owning family. It's got a stunning pulpit, alabaster inside, but of course what it's most famous for is it's got the family vaults of the Brontes. All but Anne are buried in this vault. Now it caused great outcry, of course, when they decided they were going to rebuild the entire church. Yes, we're about to come to it, Linda. In fact, you can see parts of it now. This is the cemetery to end all cemeteries. In fact, I would say of all the tours I do, this and Whitby, MB from York, as the crow flies, probably only about 35 miles, but it's a lot longer to drive because there's no direct routes. So yeah, this is, I would say this and Whitby St Mary's are the best graveyards that I'm going to do on tour. Okay, so here we go. Get ready to experience some Victorian. So of course, by the time the 1870s that this was being rebuilt, so here is the church. I'll talk about that in just one moment. By the time they were rebuilt in the 1870s, bear in mind what I said earlier, Mrs. Gaskell's book of 1857 had already kind of made the Brontes real kind of celebrities. So consequently, it was very controversial rebuilding this church, but they had no choice. It was falling down and they had a public health, sanitation, massive issue. So consequently, they had to do this. But what we know is that they were very, very careful around the body. So lead-lined, just on this side, I think where we are, on the other side of the church here, in lead-lined caskets, you've got the Bronte family. All of them apart from Anne, who's up at Scarborough on the cliffside. Many of you would join me in Scarborough to go and find Anne's grave. So let me just have a little drink and then we're going to talk a bit more about, and they're buried in lead coffins under the floor. So they're not going anywhere. We know kind of where they are. And there's a Bronte chapel in there, which is absolutely lovely, created in the 60s, that you can go and see. Thank you, Mary. And there's a table in there where Charlotte got married to a husband in 1854. And it's just opposite the family pew where they would all sit during the services. So just see the parsonage there just appearing in the middle of our picture now. So Charlotte was married there. It's a 17th century table and it was used for communion in the old church. So the parsonage is just coming into view, and the Parsonage Museum is maintained by the Bronte Society to in honour Lynn White. And a different place. Anne's a different place because she was in Scarborough when she died, and there wasn't really an opportunity to move her back to and she was happy there. Come on my Scarborough tour. When next time I do Scarborough, might not be in Hago, but you'll hear about it. And I'll tell you all about Anne Bronte because she's my favourite Bronte, actually. I like her a lot. So she died in Scarborough, so consequently she's buried there. And so the Parsonage Museum honours the three sisters, obviously Charlotte, Emily and Anne. And the museum is in the former Bronte family home. So the parsonage here at Haworth, West Yorkshire, England. This is where the sisters spent most of their lives and they wrote the most famous novels. So the Bronte Society is one of the oldest literary societies in the English-speaking world. And so they look after the collections here. So the parsonage itself was built between 1778 and 1779. So this is exactly how it was when Patrick arrived here in 1820. So he's appointed to be the incumbent of this church, or the church was rebuilt on this site, in 1820. And he arrives here with his wife Maria and 6 children. And it was to be their family home for the rest of their lives. And its kind of moorland setting had a profound influence on the writing of Charlotte, Emily and Anne. Now, Patrick Bronte himself was a published author of poetry and fiction, and as his children grew up, they were accustomed to the sight of books, carrying their kind of family name on the parsonage shelves. So it was normal for them to think about writing. Anne was the youngest of the 6 Bronte children, and she was born on the 17th of January in 1820. He was Irish, absolutely. And 3 months later, so 3 months after Anne is born, the family moves into this 5-roomed Haworth parsonage. She's only 3 months old, so they're quite literally a babe in arms when they move. And when Anne is barely a year old, her mother, Maria, became ill and died, probably due to uterine cancer, we think. And Patrick tried, without success, to remarry. So Maria's sister, Elizabeth Bramwell, who was the aunt of the children, moved to the parsonage, initially to help support Maria, but spent the rest of her life raising Maria's children. And she kind of did it from a sense of duty. She was kind of stern and expected respect rather than love. And there wasn't really a great deal of affection often between her and the older children. But according to the tradition, Anne was her favourite and the youngest. And after the older two sisters died from consumption whilst away at school, so the first two children, Maria and Elizabeth, died, Patrick decided to keep the other children and educate them from home. And the children made very little attempts to mix with others outside the parsonage and relied on each other for company. And so yeah, Jackie, Maria and Elizabeth were the first two children, but they died whilst away at school, and Patrick was so devastated, he decided to ensure that he kept the rest of his family very nearby. And so, of course, that meant he needed somewhere to educate the children. And this building right opposite, which unfortunately has got a whole bunch of scaffolding up on it at the moment, is very much part of Patrick Bronte's legacy. Because, again, by public subscription, by money coming in from wealthy donors and very, other sources, they were able to open a Sunday school here in the 1830s. I think in 1832 it first opened. And by the early 1840s, he was able to open during the week as well for religious education. The National Schools Association provided some money for funding. And all three of the sisters, Charlotte, Emily and Anne, all taught here. Charlotte got married here. So when Charlotte got married in 1854, her wedding reception was held, and she got married to the curate, who was working with her father in the church. So, as I say, this really is an absolute mecca. There's so many of, if you like, the central elements of the lives of these family happened here. So I'll just bring you so you can see the blue plaque. It's a shame it's got the scaffolding. Hopefully next time we come, that'll be gone. But you can see here the old schoolroom in Haworth, built for the children of Haworth, and Charlotte, Bramwell, Emily and Anne all taught here. And this was the site of Charlotte's wedding reception in 1854. Charlotte, of course, was the last surviving member. So I mentioned here the tower is the last kind of remaining part. And actually, during Patrick's time, he raised funds to refurbish the belfry, the bell tower, and new bells were put in there. So consequently, this is very much part of Patrick's legacy as well, is the bells that are still there, and the refurbishment of this tower happened on his watch, if you like. So these strange kind of, let's say, insular children, should we call them that? It becomes their playground. This kind of setting, these bleak moors surrounding Haworth, become their focal point. Their aunt tries to teach the girls how to run a household, but they're inclined much more towards literature. And they read much from their father's well-stocked library. And the reading really kind of feeds their imagination, and their creativity soared after their father gave Bramwell a set of toy soldiers in 1826. And they gave the names to the soldiers and developed characters. And this led to the creation of an imaginary world, the African kingdom of Angria. It was illustrated with little maps and watercolour renderings. The children devised sort of plots about the inhabitants of Angria and its capital city, Glasstown. They really were able to kind of fully internalise this world of kind of creativity. And the characters of the lands created were given newspapers and magazines and chronicles written in tiny books with writing so small it's difficult to read without magnifying glasses. Has anybody seen the Bronte children's writings? It is... Remember the red jacket following me? Okay. Not so. If not, I'll just try and find... I've got an image. I haven't got any other... Oh, no, it hasn't come up. I thought it was having trouble landing. But anyway, we'll bob that up on sort of Facebook afterwards. It is sort of rather kind of problematic. Sometimes kind of loading them up. Didn't get one bought from him. I believe it did, but they're absolutely minuscule. They are tiny, these things. You can't believe, of course, as well, without electric light, that these were kind of being written by candlelight and so forth, and natural kind of daylight. So they really are kind of quite something to behold, these books. But isn't it a wonderfully atmospheric spot? And very nearby here, is a grave of somebody who, again, was very influential on the young girls, and that is the grave of Tabitha Ackroyd. We don't know much about Tabitha before 1824, when aged 53, so she was probably born about 1771, she entered the parsonage. She was almost certainly a local. She was like a cook housekeeper for the first sort of 13 of her 31 years at the parsonage, and the only servant living in. Although the Bronte sisters themselves cooked, cleaned and washed clothes. But in December 1836, Tabby slips on the ice in Haworth's Main Street, badly breaking her leg. And Aunt Brownwell suggests she should leave the parsonage to be nursed by her sister, but the children objected, even on hunger strike. So Tabby stayed at the parsonage. And it's a lovely story, isn't it? I'm just trying to find her grave. Tumbling Tabby, absolutely. But her leg never fully healed, sadly. And so over the next 3 years, many of Tabby's duties was taken up by Emily. It was Emily that became Tabby. It's one of these round here. I'm just trying to find it. I know it's right under the shadow of some of the graves open at the sides, body snatchers. I suspect not so much body snatchers, more related to subsidence, things kind of falling over. So I can't see it because everything's a bit mucky at the minute, but it's certainly one of these around here, I know. I'll keep looking. Has anyone looked at studying and publishing details on the headstones? I'm sure, absolutely, that there will be people that have studied a great deal of these. I can't just see it at the moment, but I'll keep walking around and keep looking. So the other servant in the house was 11-year-old Martha Brown, who was one of 6 daughters of John Brown, who was the sexton of this church, and he lived in the house just next door to the parsonage, so the house right at the end there, so very, very close to the parsonage. They do need a really, really kind of good clean, because what happens is, as you can see, there's an awful lot of kind of detritus, because this is essentially kind of a pretty wild, overgrown, but isn't it atmospheric? It is absolutely wonderful. But I do know it's very, very close. It's one of these around here, but with my eyes, I'm not seeing it. But isn't it, yeah, the noise. If I just be quiet for just a minute to listen. Isn't that amazing? So, of course, just near here, very Gothic, you can see this was the site of the gates leading to the church used by the Bronte family and through which they were carried to their final resting place in the church. So we can see, if you look down, you see the line of brick there, you see the straight line? So this has been created now as part of the boundary of, thank you, Michelle, for links to the grave. It's definitely one of these around here, but everything's just so mucky, I can't make out which one it is, but hopefully I'm going to keep looking. So you can see there, if I just pan back a little bit, see the straight lines of the cement either side, you can see where the gate was. So consequently, this is the way that the family came and went from the parsonage to the church. So again, let me just come a bit closer and just give you a nice view of the parsonage there, our sort of first unencumbered view. It's a spectacularly sort of dour looking building, don't you think? So Tabby and Martha, to your right, John leant up. To your right, John, just right behind you. It is dead nearby here, yeah. I know that. Is it this one? I just can't see which one. I think it's nice, all wood inside. I can't read that one. It's definitely one of these around here. It's definitely one of these. In the middle it says Tabitha. Yeah, I know. It's not the top one, is it? There's somebody else's name at the top. I saw it last time I was here, and I'm just trying to pick it out. It's definitely in this area. But it might be this one. I've an idea it's one of the table ones, but as you can see, everything is just so mucky. It's very, very difficult. According to Mrs. Gaskell, by the way, Tabby sort of abounded with a strong practical sense and shrewdness, and she was very influential on the children. She kind of very much looked after them, took them under her wing, and despite the fact she was a sort of very, very, she was very pious. You know, she was a lady with a very, very kind of strong faith conviction. She was also very kind of aware of the myths and legends, obviously kind of pagan stories, you know, kind of associated with sort of times gone by. So consequently, they were being exposed not just to the Christian narrative, but also older, sort of more natural magic, if you like. And as you can imagine, in these isolated places, the supernatural, is much, much closer than we might think in sort of modern life. So Tabby was like the antidote to their aunt, who's kind of formal and structured, need to go right near the corner of the railings. Okay, so maybe it's this one. Let's have a look. So could it be this one? Let me just, ouch, I just stabbed myself then. There's a big tree, so unfortunately I'm going to walk on a grave, which I don't like doing, but that was the only way of doing it. So maybe it is this one. So the corner of the railings are here. But again, the moss and the muck. So there's the railings. There is the right-hand corner. So it's definitely in. As I say, I knew we were in kind of this part of the cemetery. It was finding precisely which one. When, as I say, the green moss is covering it. 5 straight ahead, Robert. So it's either that one, or unless it's this one. I think we're going to struggle today. But we know you definitely got to, in some way, if I kind of keep panning, it is the first one between the railing and the wall. On the right-hand side, Deborah, the Bronte Parsonage Museum. 5 lines down. So that, is it that one then, leaning? Is it that one there? Let's go around and see if we can find Tabitha. It is the search for Tabitha. We're not going to give up. So do we think it's this one? Ah, here we are. So if I come out there, can you see? This is also the site of Tabitha Ackroyd. We finally found it. Oh, isn't that fantastic? I'm so pleased. I'm sorry I couldn't see it, but obviously you can just see it's very, very difficult to walk around. I'm trying not to walk on graves. But as I say, she sort of treated the children like they were kind of her family, really. She called them the Childers. She took them for walks on the moors, so it's her that really exposed the children to this kind of wild world outside. She had very old-fashioned ways, a kind of broad Haworth accent, and she was involved in very boisterous games. She's a great storyteller, so she really inspires the children to use their imagination to kind of really kind of fire them up. And I say she's a Christian, but she's very much in touch with nature's old ways. So that's who we're talking about, Marlon. So she was the living servant, who was then helped by young Martha Brown, daughter of John Brown, who was the sexton, who lived, as I say, just in that house over there. She came to work at the house when she was 11. But you see how close everything is. It's you see the church behind us. Without me moving, you've got the church there, you've got the sexton's house. This is the Sunday school, the school where all the children taught, Patrick Brown set up. Again, I haven't actually moved my feet. We've got Tabitha's grave there. Turning round here, we've got the parsonage. You can just see, yes, Nellie Dean, yes, absolutely, was said to be inspired by Tabitha. So a very kind of big, louder-than-life character. So you can just sort of see how small their world is. And what's fascinating with the Brontes is they all go off and do different things. Some of them go off to teach, as governesses and so forth. But they all keep on ending up back here. For whatever reason, they can't actually break away from this spot. Whether it's illness, unhappiness, alcoholism, scandal on the part of Bramwell, who's had an affair with the wife of Anne's employer, which kind of led to them both having to make a hasty kind of exit. But they kept coming back. They never got far. Anne, in many respects, dying in Scarborough, is the only one that ever really managed to get away. Absolutely, she lived away, but she came back. And she ended up living back here and marrying, the curate that was working with her father. So there just seems to be absolutely this draw, this pull to this kind of part of the world. So let's just come in and we'll take a different view of the house. And John Brown's grave is over here somewhere, but I'm not quite sure which one it is. So did Anne pass in a hotel in Scarborough? Do you know, I think she might have done. She was very ill. She's dying. Unlike Emily, she actually did take her treatments, because Emily, when she knew she was dying, she refused to take any kind of medication, whereas Anne did, but it didn't help her. And they all died so young. It is really kind of remarkable kind of how young they were. So Anne's the first one that moves away, 15 she moves away, but she goes away for 2 years. She returns home during the holidays, and she's a very studious girl. Are we liking it here, by the way? Thank you, Linda. So remind me who's actually been, because I'm going to take us up and we'll have a look onto the moors in a minute, see how well our signal lasts. But isn't it, can you sort of feel a weird atmosphere though? There is something very oppressive here. I don't know if you remember, Fiona, when you came here, but when you go inside, there's something about the place that sits heavy. I don't know, Shelley, if it's haunted. I wouldn't be at all surprised. There is something. Did you feel it, Susan? Did you feel it, Pam? Something, yes, the past, it's got an atmosphere, but it isn't especially pleasant. I'm going to be honest with you, it is a little bit eerie. There is something about the place, something about the repression, the lives those girls, that family lived, is here, embedded, right? That's a great word, Sharon. Something embedded in it here. It feels like this should be a place of God, but it feels incredibly desolate for reasons that I can't explain. It feels almost damned. Claustrophobic. No joy in that house. So they internalise the joy, don't they? Or rather, they explore and they find it. We know that Emily, for instance, is highly introverted, but goes out on these tremendous long walks. For those that know the area, and I'm hoping in future, obviously not on Hago, but to take us up to Top Withens, location setting for Wuthering Heights, down to the Bronte Chair, to the waterfall. They're wonderful places where the creativity happened. Yeah, oh God, if you had Fogger, I think I'd just get the willies and run away. Sadness, grief and loneliness. I think, Sharon, you're right on the money. But there's something about it that I can't explain what it is, other than those that have been know it, and even virtually, I think you're experiencing it right now. I think you know, even if I hadn't said anything, I think you'd know what I was talking about. Listen to the rooks. Isn't it? So this is where it happens. And when it happens, at first it's slow, the post doesn't really kind of get picked up. But then suddenly they break through, don't they? Charlotte comes up with the professor. Anne comes up with Agnes Grey. But of course, absolutely exploding out of the tracks then, the next time round, is Wuthering Heights. And then Jane Eyre, straight off the back of it. And of course, because of the way the world worked in those days, these three girls were not going to get a publisher. So suddenly Ellis, Acton and Currer Bell appear on the literary landscape. And nobody knows who they are. Is it one person? Are they male? Are they female? If they're female, what right have they got to write such stories with characters like Mitch Rochester, with characters and brutalised like Heathcliff? In her second and final book, Tenant of Wildfell Hall, Anne writes about domestic violence, and how men are with drunkenness and violence towards women. So they were dealing with subjects that were not comfortable. These are not cosy books. This is not the light-hearted gentility of Jane Austen that we were talking about the other day in Stamford. These are dark lives and portrayals of people and unhappiness, of mental illness, of domestic violence, of loneliness. So they do, I think, have a hold on us. And of course, hauntings in the case of Wuthering Heights. So, it's no wonder that people were scandalised. And when finally they found out these were written by women, that really just upped the ante in terms of people's attitude towards them. What was it? And that's what Mrs. Gaskell came here in 1857 to discover shortly after the death of Charlotte. Charlotte had married in 1854, but was dead sort of 2 years later. Not one of them lived beyond the age of 31, I believe. All the 6 children dead before the age of 31. Patrick lived on until the late 1860s, but finally died The house was kind of shut down. But, they all died incredibly young. As you say, the crypt is the church beyond us. So I think what we'll do is we'll just have a little walk up now, because I want to show you some of the more. I know we're coming towards the end of our kind of time together today. Don't really need that too much into that. But isn't it just an amazing place? It's a shame we've never been here before. Yeah, so Robert's quite right. I mean, these books are now out of copyright, so you ought to be able to buy the quick, cheap versions. $2 or $3 ought to get you, kind of cheap paperback. Or by all means, obviously go and buy a sort of deluxe version. But they're out of copyright. They're not expensive books to buy. But yeah, I like that, Sharon. Sadness, grief, betrayal. I think today you start to get a sense of why. All the versions are great. Obviously, some wonderful film dramatisations, BBC television, other sort of drama. I'm sure there's all manner of portrayals of these stories because they're timeless. They deal with human emotion, so consequently they don't date. The circumstances, the references within them might, but what underpins them, loneliness, isolation, unhappy marriages, are subjects that are just as timely today, right? I mean, they haven't gone away. But still, there's this question, why, that stranger, why is it Emily Bronte, who is almost violently introverted, doesn't talk to anybody, barely really engages with her sisters that much, and when she does, it's in whispered corners with Anne. She won't kind of raise her voice, she won't kind of be in any way visible to those around her, can sit down and can create Heathcliff and Cathy, and can create one of the strangest. Please, can you, the plaque of the graveyard, Sharon? I'll do my best. But I think you were taking it for a parking thing, which isn't terribly exciting. So, I see. I know what you mean. This is the one telling you about Tabitha and John Brown's grave, I believe, from Brightly. Just wait for these folks to get by. Yeah, so this is just about the sort of notable graves that are here. So the Brown family, which is obviously Martha's father, who lived just there, Sexton's house, and Tabby's grave, which we managed to find in the end. If I pan backwards, you can take your postcards of that. And we'll just go and have a look now, the last final few minutes of the tour, up onto the landscape. So definitely we want to go up to Top Withens, Eliza, because Top Withens is the setting. Top Withens isn't Wuthering Heights, it's much smaller than Wuthering Heights is described. But we believe it is the setting where Emily would walk for hours alone on the moors, in all weathers. Which when you think about someone saying about kind of tiny feet, they certainly wouldn't have had big solid walking boots like I've got on today. Isn't that gorgeous? Look at that as a postcard. Let me just try and get that metal out of the way so you can get there. There's an elegance about, thank you, Catherine, about this, isn't there? It is austere, but equally, does she have a Humphrey? She may have done. But equally, there is something not just dramatic, but aesthetically pleasing. The lamp, absolutely. And so little changed. As I say, we know that the church has changed, but this, let me just hold you on this door and say, this is the door that Charlotte, Anne, Emily, Patrick, Bramwell went in and out on a daily basis. It was a door to the school. This is the place where this history absolutely happens. There's no distance here. We're connecting quite literally with the past in the present. So Top Withens, it's probably about 2.5 miles. There's a village, I think, called, is it Stanhope or somewhere? It's the next village up, and that's where you're best driving up there and having a walk from there rather than walking from here. But it's best to you can walk across Stanbury. That's I knew it was something like Stanbury. That's the kind of the best way to get there. It's the shortest way to get there, rather. So there's a rather kind of modern annex on the back of here, which is obviously access to the museum, because obviously this is the Parsonage Museum, which is now kind of low. But let's just, I don't know when the signal's going to drop and disappear. When it does, that's as far as we can kind of get to. Or if we can get through this gate, it may be locked. Let's see. But I'd quite like to be able to bring you onto a bit of Mullen. Otherwise, we'll do it next time. We'll start at Stanbury and we'll walk up to Top Withens. It may be, that's on a different channel, I don't know yet. It might be a Facebook Live or something, but we'll work through that. a hard walk in the hills. But if you remember, I've done drone photography up there. Those that have seen the at-home version of this, it is. So let's see if I can. Can I open this gate? Not very easily, I'm afraid. So I think we will pause here, and I don't want to fall over. I could climb over this gate, but I would fall over. So let me just instead sort of bring down the tripod thing there. So you're just going to take it in really and just have a look really at this landscape and just imagine young Emily Bronte wrapping herself up against the weather and taking herself off over that mound and then walking 2 miles across the moor, down to the Bronte chair, to the waterfall, shawl and bonnet, absolutely, against the bitter winds and the cold. This is her footsteps. These are, well, we're on the sort of edge of the Pennines here, MB. So the North Yorkshire moors we were in when we were up in. We were in the moors not so long back, I forget which. There's Yorkshire Dales, which is where we're in Hawes. The moors above them, and obviously this is the sort of Pennine side, so not far from the kind of the Dales. I think that Lois, I think you're onto something there. She found another world within herself, and that's a really, really good way of putting it. Now my car's down at the bottom of the hill, so do you want to walk down to the bottom of the hill with me, rather than me kind of sort of wrapping up here? Would you like to do that? Yeah, let's do that. So any questions that I've missed, and obviously I didn't want to give like a whole sort of dissertation on the Brontes. You know, if you haven't read the Bronte stories, I would suggest Wuthering Heights, just because it's a cracking novel, is a great place to start. Jane Eyre equally. So either of those two, you can't go too far wrong. If you want to read a book that very few people that I've ever spoken to have read, but oh, look at the lamb. Let me just bring you in here. There's a little lamb gambling around. Can you see? Oh, it's Mum. Let me just bring it over there. Sorry. Sorry, it's annoyingly coming to... There we are. And that's not great for postcards because on high zoom, but little lamb, only a few days old there, suckling mum. Yeah, we're going to walk past it. We're going to walk on our kind of way back down again, but isn't that just fabulous? You know, that. Thank you, Francie. That, you know, but that's to say how close this all is. So I'll just come off zoom because zoom's a bit crazier, or 10 times zoom at the minute. But that, you know, is the house. You know, that is the wall and the side of the house. This is onto the moorland. So you can see very much Kate Bush's haunting song, absolutely, about Heathcliff. No. Thank you, Joe. The very first job of the Bronte's father. No, he was a curate elsewhere. I've forgotten the name. So this area actually is called Parson's Field. First off, look. So everyone's welcome here, but sort of watch out for the dogs. But it's all locked up, so I did hope I could sort of bring it onto Parsons Field. But as you can see, it is chained. But next time maybe. But I just wanted to sort of impress on you quite how close the parsonage is. Why is it to live here? Because it's nice. So demand is high, Natalie, so consequently the prices are high. It's a straightforward supply and demand situation. You know, there's lots of places nearby here that aren't as nice and are very cheap to live, but this isn't one of them. So, very good. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave it there. It's been absolutely delightful to have you with me today. Clearly there's other guides that are on, so I'm going to leave you in their capable hands. Thank you very, very much. I love having you with me. And so do make sure, as I say, you've signed up with the Facebook group and you have done the subscription, and we'll be in touch very, very soon. So go, continue enjoying Hago, be kind to each other, and I'll see you very, very soon. So thank you, everybody. It's been an absolute delight. I've loved bringing you to Haworth, and we'll be back again one day. It just won't have a button on there saying Hago. All right? See you soon, guys. Bye-bye.